Welcome back. Today's video is on the law of cosines, and the key here is knowing that the law of cosines is going to be used when you have two types of triangles. One where you're given all three side lengths, and then the other where you're given two side lengths and the included angle. So that means the angle between the two sides. In orange here, I've got the formula for the law of cosines. Notice that in my equation, it looks like almost like we've got Pythagorean theorem and then a part attached at the end. That's an easy way to remember, but also note that these letters could be switched around in order depending on the information that you are given and what you're solving for. So don't get attached to the fact that A has to come first, because sometimes we might be solving for side B or side C. Okay? Really what I want to go through today is just one example, and it's going to be showing you how you can use the law of cosines. And just like the law of sines, we're going to start off by taking all of the information that we're given in the picture and putting it into a chart. So we've got here R, W, and T, and then we've got the sides R, W, and T. And what we're given here is all three sides. I'm going to go ahead and label those. Side R is 15, side W is 12, and then side T is 13. And before we actually get started with this, I want to remind you that your sides should match up with your angles. So the largest side length in this triangle is 15, which means that R should end up being the largest angle measure. The smallest side is 12, and that means that W should be the smallest angle. That's an easy way to check your answers and make sure that they match up. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. If you remember from the law of sines, the goal is to look for one entire row of information, but obviously here we don't have any angle measures, so we're not going to have an entire row of information, which means we have to use the law of cosines. And in this case, really what you have to do is just pick what you want to solve for first. I'm going to go ahead and start off by solving for angle T. And if we do that, what we want to do is plug the information we have into our formula here in orange. I'm going to start by plugging in T into the A spot because we're looking for angle T, and the angle is what goes in the cosine spot. So if you look here, the angle and the side length letters have to match up. Okay? And when we plug this in, it's going to look like this. 13 squared is going to be equal to, and then we're going to deal with our two sides, 15 squared plus 12 squared minus 2 times 15 times 12, and then the cosine of angle T, which we don't know. And now it's just a matter of simplifying. So I'm going to just go to my calculator and multiply what I can, add what I can, and then solve for T. So 13 squared is 169. Then we've got 15 squared, which is 225, plus 144. And then I have to multiply these three numbers together. So we get 2 times 15 times 12, that's 360. So we've got minus 360 times the cosine of angle T. Now, where people make the biggest mistake is accidentally combining these three numbers here. However, you can't do that because the 360 and the cosine are connected by multiplication. So consider them boxed off from everything else. So now what we'd have to do to solve this is move the 225 and the 144 over. So I'm going to subtract 225 over to the other side, and I'd get 169 minus 225 is negative 56 equals 144 minus 360 cosine of T. Then I'm going to subtract 144 over to the other side. And when we do that, we get negative 200. So we've got negative 200 equals negative 360 times the cosine of T. And then to solve to get cosine of T on its own, we're going to divide everything by negative 360. Now, one thing I would encourage you to do is to keep everything in fraction form. It will be easier to type in that way. So I'm going to cancel out my zeros here, and then I can go ahead and divide negative 20 divided by negative 36, and that's going to get us positive 5/9 equals the cosine of T. And if you remember from the last section when we talked about solving for angle measures, all you have to do is hit second cosine and then type in the fraction, and it would look something like this. And when you do that, in your calculator, you should get 56.25 degrees. So the measure of angle T equals 56.25 degrees. And we can go ahead and fill that into our chart. 56.25 degrees. And if you look, now if we look at our chart, we have a full row of information, which is great because if you have a full row of information, if you remember from the last video, that means we can use the law of sines. So now I'm going to solve for R and W's angle measures, but instead of using the law of cosines, I'm going to use proportions with the law of sines. Let's start by solving for angle R. If I do that, I'm going to plug into my proportion. I'm going to have my angle T, so sine of 56.25 over 13 equals sine of angle R over its side length, 15. And then I can go ahead and cross multiply. And because I've already done this in the last video, I'm just going to show you what my answer would look like. I'd get that the sine of R is equal to, let me type this in, the decimal 0.9594. And then again, we'd hit second sign in most calculators and then type in that decimal. And by doing that, you would get that the angle measure here for R is 73.62 degrees. Let me go back and fill that in at the top. So angle R is 73.62 degrees. And then from here, if I needed to find the last angle for angle W, it should be very quick. All you have to do here is subtract from 180. When we subtract from 180, which I've got shown here at the top, we get 50.13 degrees. And we're done. So we solved for every missing angle. Now we're finished with the problem, and you could always double check your work by making sure the largest angle goes with the largest side, smallest angle goes with the smallest side, and in this case it does. If you have any questions about the law of cosines, when to use it, how to use it, let me know. Just be careful with your calculations, don't forget PEMDAS, and always remember, if you have a full row, use the law of sines. If you don't have a full row, then start with the law of cosines. You should only have to use the law of cosines once in a problem when you're solving for non-right triangles. That's it for today. Thanks for listening.